We're on episode
8 question mark?
I think it's episode 9. I'm almost sure it's episode 9.
Episode 9.
It's episode 9.
It's episode 9, and
Thanks,
I think
Tanner.
at the beginning of episode 8, we call that episode 7. So who knows what's real? Who knows what's imaginary?
It's all a mess.
Phase 5 delayed. That's the news today.
Yeah.
Mid-September. So much for going to Phase 5 here in Nova Scotia. It's been pushed back to, I guess, early October. What that means for schools and these public spaces and all that we're about to be mask off. I don't know. So we shall see.
Should we say play mask off?
Mask off. We can't afford the royalties to that.
Yeah, true.
Bleep that out, Tanner. Mask off. What are we doing today? Actually, what's new? What's going on in your life? Actually, no, that's a false leader because I know exactly what's going on.
You know exactly what's going on in my life.
Not fun.
Unfortunately, some of these things cannot be disclosed publicly quite yet.
I love how you're like, this is good cop, bad cop. Neil's always up to shenanigans, and I'm over here being the good guy.
But yeah, so just working on some of the multis and some refinances, and there's some difficulties being faced.
Yep.
Once I get them resolved, I'll let you know what happened.
It's going to be a damn good episode.
That'll be a very good episode, but I'll probably lose all my hair between now and that episode.
Yeah.
So what's going on in your life?
Well, I've got an offer in on that property that we were talking about that you were suggesting maybe I should just skip and scale up and do something bigger, but everyone likes a little side project, so we'll see if that comes together, that 8 unit. And that'd be kind of fun because that would be something to talk about from, day one, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just doing it for the podcast, guys. I'm buying this building for the sake of the podcast.
Imagine just throwing down on an 8 unit for the podcast. What a guy.
What a guy.
It's a martyr.
What are we going to talk about today? Neil, we got a couple things in mind.
We're going to do 2 big hits, or maybe 2 small hits.
Small, big. We're going to do 2 hits.
We got 2
Let's say
hits.
that. Yeah.
I'm talking about the Brrrr method.
Yep.
Everyone likes to throw that out there.
Yep.
Brrrr. B-R-R-R-R-R.
Mm-hmm.
Too many R's. 4
Too many
R's.
Yep.
We'll get into that in a minute. And you're covering...
Just general steps of purchasing, because I think we've covered a lot of topics here and glossed over some things that we take for granted that people maybe understand that they don't quite. I mean, I've referenced Brrrr before and how it's kind of what everyone does, but someone then branded it really smart, and we should dive into kind of the nuance of it for people that maybe don't understand it. And then steps to purchasing. There might be some people listening to this that have not purchased yet, so maybe we kind of take one step backwards so we can take a couple steps forward with people here.
Yeah, I think 100%. I got some feedback from a few listeners, the 3 that we have. And
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. And that was one thing. They had some questions about even just like the basics. So it makes sense. Need to get a footing before you start running.
Yeah, and I think especially because you and I, obviously we've bought a lot of properties ourselves, but also we're agents. So we're kind of doing this every day, and it's almost second nature. And it was funny in preparing for this. I was like, yeah, these are all the things that I do that I now no longer even think about doing when it comes to guiding someone through the steps of a purchase. So should we start with mine? Because I think the Brrrr model is maybe a little bit more advanced, if you will. And in order to complete that model, you have to first buy the property. So we can start with mine.
Start with the P for buy.
Right on. Okay, that's right. So steps to purchasing. The first thing that the first step is to surround yourself with the right team. I took some time to really think about what I would tell people to do first, but it really is to surround yourself with an appropriate team. And for me, that's always been people that I feel comfortable working with and are inspired by. I mean, so often in this industry, it's referral based. So clients randomly end up with a friend of a friend or their aunt or the person that their cousin worked with. And in some cases, that person happens to be me. And I feel really...
I was going to say, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I think that's great. But I know that I always try to make sure that I'm the right fit for that person. And I really think buyers should be doing that, making sure that there's a fit match, personality-wise, goal-based. But also, I try to surround myself with like-minded individuals regardless of what I'm doing. So when it comes to real estate, if I'm thinking about multi-unit properties, I went out of my way to seek those people out.
Yeah, I think that's something that's undervalued by a lot of people. I made the mistake too when I started. And I realize now that it made a huge impact. And I look at some of the best deals that I got. It was by aligning myself with, I guess in this case, if we're talking agents, it was agents that were in that world, understood the game, and were able to help me do it. Versus, you're right, I see a lot of people that get referred to people like, oh, well, I know them through this and this. And like at the end of the day, I pick the property, I do this, I do that. So it's kind of on me. And I'm like, you'd be surprised how much value someone can add to what you do if it's the right person and they align with what you're looking to do.
Yeah, like for me personally, my mortgage broker has multi-unit properties. My inspector has multi-unit properties. My lawyers have multi-unit properties. The guy who does my sewer is involved in real estate. Like every single person in each phase of the process is involved in multi-unit properties because that's what my goal is. It's a little bit different if you're, just trying to get started off with a single family home. At that point, I think what matters most is the personality and the comfort level, the rapport that you have, because this is the biggest investment you're going to make in your life, and you need to be able to speak candidly with the people helping you because there's a financial component to it, there's an emotional component to it, and if you can't have a really open conversation with the person that's supposed to be representing you, that is going to be a problem. So I am a believer in personality fit, and of course expertise. So goal-based, experienced in what you want to do, a good personality fit, and inspiring to what you hope to accomplish. I think if you can surround yourself with an agent and, a support group that kind of reaches above what you're maybe doing currently, but can be with you through the growth, I think that's the first most important step. So for me, I would probably go broker first and then real estate agent, or would you go real estate agent first and then broker?
I would go real estate agent, then broker.
Okay. It's hard. I know, I feel obviously biased. Obviously you should call the real estate agent first, but you do need to get your money. You do need to get your money first.
Why didn't you text me that question before we started so I could think about that a little?
I don't know. Put you on the spot.
Yeah. See, the thing that I face is a lot of people that come to me that want to get into investing. They tell me, I'm like, oh, who's your broker? And they tell me, and I'm like, that's not true. A person that's going to be able to help you grow because the financial aspect of purchasing is probably one of the bigger, harder parts. And it's really, really important that you have a good person on the broker side that can allow you to get there. And if you're going in as a green party or someone who's new to it, and then you try to go pick out a broker, you don't even really know what you're picking, to be honest.
That's true. Yeah.
Because you don't really know the products and what you're talking about.
That's a great point.
So if you can go out and find an agent that you know is already doing the business, you've seen them help other people, then they likely know a broker that also understands the game. Yeah, and I think it's easier to get that agent's rapport than a broker's because agents are very vocal. And everyone can tell you about their agent. Brokers are a little bit more behind the scenes.
That's true. I think what that suggests, and maybe the answer is find the person in the level of the process, be it brokering, be it the real estate agent, be it the lawyer, be it the inspector, the person that you are most comfortable and familiar with and think is on the same alignment with what you want to accomplish. Maybe go to them first and then say, hey, unpack this process for me with the people you work with. Because when someone comes to me, I sort of have this in-house team that's already lined up to make sure that's going to be a smooth transaction and that I feel will already be a perfect fit for them. But if someone has that relationship with a person who happens to be in the mortgage world, and because you need to get your money sorted out first, then, I can see going to the mortgage professional first as well. But I guess the person with whom you maybe have the most natural connection
and knowledge about kind of what their industry is.
Yeah. And I always say they're going to give you a referral, but do your own due diligence on a referral. Just because 100%. Someone sends you, say you have a great relationship with your realtor and they send you to a mortgage professional, that mortgage professional maybe, is great for some people, but they may not be the right fit for you. I even say that when, someone chooses to work with someone else, I'm not going to be the right fit for everyone. Yeah. And if someone doesn't feel most comfortable with me, then I would rather them go with someone that they do feel most comfortable with. Yeah. In the rare times that happens. But, so that's step one. Surround yourself with a really good group of people. And that's not just trusting that they're experienced. It's about validating that they're experienced and, ensuring that their goals align with yours and that you have a good, comfortable relationship. And people, if you're in a situation like, well, I feel like I can't really ask them these questions to see if we're on the same path. It's like, well, there's your answer right there. Right? Yeah. I think anyone that works with me, we can have a very, very candid conversation about any part of the process. Right? Yeah. And I think that's important.
100%.
So step 2 is what I call the draft of your search criteria. So when you're entering the market as a buyer, you have an idea in your head of what you think you want. Be it room counts, location, amount of work, features of the home, what have you. At the first level, this is like, those with a science background. This is your hypothesis. This is what I think.
15,000 square feet, 26 bedrooms.
Yeah, I'm open to waterfront, but I'm not married to it. I think you have to set this goal, this objective. And that's step 2, this draft criteria. And this is a good point where you could engage an agent to help refine that. But realistically, at this point, it's all hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to people kind of when you meet for the first time and they've got these lists either attainable or sometimes unfocused? Because that can be hard too.
Yeah, I think most people are pretty focused, honestly. I think I get the odd person that's like, yeah, I'm game for anywhere in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I can have a garage, no garage, could have 6 bedrooms, could have no bedrooms. And I'm like,
yeah, those are almost harder, but
they're
good
way
in the open, but
definitely harder, 100%. Even though they're open, it's way harder to like make a decision because every time you get to a place, it's like, what are you comparing against? And like, well, over on that part of the city. But most people have like the basics down. They're like, and there's the biggest ones, like bathroom count. Like that's like I think like one of the most common ones. Everyone's like, I need at least 2 bathrooms because I can't share one shower with a million people. And then the garage I find is usually a big criteria, and number of bedrooms. But most houses, for the most part, I have at least 3. I have very rarely get someone who's like, I need at least 6 bedrooms. Like so there's those aspects, and then there's also like kind of the I guess I don't want to say renovation, but the maintenance level. Mm-hmm. Some people are comfortable to get into some maintenance. Some people don't want to deal with anything. But I typically get them to give me their whole list, and I'll guide them. I'll usually like, do you want this, those main topics I just said? And then I'll ask them for their budget or location, sorry. So what neighborhood, if they're open to a few. And then I'll typically ask them what their budget is. And again, knowing the market very well, I can pretty quickly be like, all right, we just want this list. That's 500. And then like when they say their budget's 3, I'm like,
yeah, that's why I usually get to the budget earlier in the process, right? Because I'm like, what's your budget? Because that's going to drive the area in a lot of cases. And I say, well, what area are you interested in? And then they say, and I was like, well, that's attainable, that's not, and so on and so forth. But either way, at this level of the process, at step 2 level of the process, all of these ideas, this set of criteria that you think you have is just a draft. Yeah. Right. Because the next step, step 3, is data collection. And that's when you go out there, pound the pavement, whatever you want to call it, and actually view properties. Right. So the first thing I always tell people is the challenge is you may think you want one thing, but until you go out there and see these homes, see what your dollar gets you in different areas, you may find that what you think you want changes. Right.
Yeah.
So when you do these showings and you start comparing property over here versus property over there, and all of a sudden you're gravitating to this property for no reason, right? Yeah. They're the same house, they're just in 2 areas. Well, apparently then location is more important to you than you thought. Yeah. So in the data collection phase, you do the viewings and then quickly reassess your search criteria and try to get a little bit more focused in.
Yeah, 100%. And that's like once people say their budget, that's when I typically will be like, look, like you said, some of these are not attainable. And if someone's throwing some like kind of out of left field, they're giving me something random, a lot of times I'll be like, hey, maybe have you driven through that neighborhood before? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe take a zip out, like drive from work, like on the way home today. How about you drive there and see how your drive was?
Yeah, spare me the trip.
Basically,
sometimes it's spare me the trip.
That's effectively what it is. But at the same time, it's like I've come to realize because when I was new, I would just say yes to everything and I'd go out. And it's kind of a waste of everyone's time because I'll like, I mean, a prime example for us here is Eastern Passage. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the location. But it is a bigger commute for a lot of people if you're coming from Halifax because there's no direct highway to Eastern Passage. Mm-hmm. And so, there's brand new neighborhoods there, good prices, some with water views and things like that. And so a lot of people will be like, oh, yeah, like this is great. Like I can finally get a new home. I can see the ocean, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, we'll drive home from Halifax today and go to Eastern Passage on the way home. Mm-hmm. And then the next day they'll call me and be like, I'm not interested because by the time I got off the highway, I then had to spend another 10, 12 minutes driving into town. Yeah,
and conversely, you might have someone that works in Burnside, but has lived historically in Halifax and has never even heard of Eastern Passage. And then maybe that becomes a better fit for them, especially when they're like, man, I can get a fairly new home over here.
Exactly.
So the data collection phase is about having the showings, reassessing your criteria, and then doing research like neighborhood research, as you mentioned, historical sales, which we're really fortunate here in the province. Those are
public.
Pretty well public, but also you're going to lean on your support group and your agent about historical sales. And then part of the process, sadly, right now in this market is unsuccessful bids and missing out on properties.
Yeah.
And this is why every now and again a client will say, well, I don't know, there's nothing that looks perfect. And I'm like, we're not going for perfect. Mm-hmm. First of all, you don't have the budget for perfect in some cases, but we want to go out there and see the things that you don't want so that it helps narrow us in on what you do want.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're building your frame of reference. And, even if we think this home over here is not a fit for you for this reason, let's go see it because that home is going to sell. And when that home sells, it'll tell us information about the market as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you don't like this home over here because it's on a main road, but it still sells for 300, that tells us something about what that home would be worth on a side road.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth more than 300.
Exactly.
So I think going out there, going through the process, and unfortunately seeing things sell, and whether you're bidding on them or not, you kind of take that information, put it in the data bank, because our job as a realtor is never to sell you a property. Our job is to help you collect the information so that you can make an informed decision. So that you as a buyer, when a home comes up, and you're like, I believe this to be the right home for me because I have seen these other things. Like there's that expression, you got to slay a few dragons to get to the princess, right? You're going to have to see some homes that aren't, aren't necessarily fit in order to get to the right one.
Not sure I get the reference, but
Neal Binsley, there's a sword under the table. Let me tell you.
Okay. Anyways, no, that's definitely the biggest mistake I would say a lot of first time buyers make. I get that message a lot where it's like someone's like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a house." All right, sweet. And then like we get through with the stuff, even if they get a pre-approval, then they don't like any of the houses that in particular, and then they pick one that they just love and they have to go see. And I'm like, that's a good bad thing, because like we can get there and like you don't know the difference between this and shit. And so when I get and we get there and I'm like, this is an amazing house, and then I can see that on their eyes, like, is he being a realtor right now? Is he trying to up something? And I'm like, no, I promise you, like, this is a great house. Or sometimes we'll get there and it's kind of shit, and I'm like, this is a bad house. Like, this is a garbage house.
And this is also why we go see them in person.
Exactly. Yep. So I always tell everyone, I say, look, even if you're not planning to buy for like 3 to 6 months, like if you see a few that you're kind of interested in, just hit me up. I don't mind taking you out for one showing every couple weeks, because you need to process that. Because then the day when we get in the house that you're like, okay, I've seen 5, now I'm confident to bid 100K over ask. Exactly. Because I know this house is a good house.
Yeah. All the time I tell people, sometimes the hardest thing is when the first one you see is the right one.
Yeah.
Because you have nothing to compare it to. Yeah. And then you're right, in this market, there'll be a situation where someone will email me on a Tuesday. Yeah. On a Wednesday, we're meeting at the property. We don't even have time to have our, in-person meeting, which, there's a period there where we couldn't go for coffee anyway. Yep. So you'd meet these relative strangers at a house. You'd walk in there and, we'd leave. They'd love it. And I'd say something like, well, it's been really great to meet you. Offers are due in 3 hours, and we're probably going to have to be 70,000 over. Yeah. And that's a difficult thing, right? So again, part of what would help is when they built their group around them, their professionals, they and I would have had a chance to connect and build some rapport. But also, if we had seen 5 homes before, that can help as well. So again, data collection is about...
It helps us find you houses too, realistically.
Totally.
Because something may, like rarely now, but there may be an off market. And it's just like when we're looking through the online listings, like I'm like, okay, I know this is something that really bugged them. It wasn't originally said, but this is something they didn't like. Yeah. So it allows me to be more productive for you.
Yeah. I mean, there have been tons of times where people say, oh, I don't mind a little bit of work. And then we go to a place that has like carpet and they're like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, okay, we've now learned a little bit about ourselves here.
Yeah.
So step 4 then is the offer process and the due diligence. I've kind of put this as one step because they are effectively tied together. Once you reach that point where you are ready to make an offer, people often say, well, what do we do now? It's like, well, you submit the offer. Yeah. And it's a nerve-wracking experience. The nice thing, and what I always tell buyers is that, listen, everything in our offers are there to protect you as the buyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to outline our main things are our terms, right? Our condition terms, our deposit, and our price. Yeah. Realistically, those are the main things. Once we have those agreed to and we submit our bid, if we're successful, we still then have our due diligence period. Yep. Even in this crazy world where people are sometimes waiving one or more clauses, there's typically an allowance in there of 7 to 10 days to finalize your financing, do your inspections, review some disclosure documents, and reflect on this purchase that you're about to make.
Yep.
So you submit the offer. If you're fortunate enough to have it accepted, you give a deposit. Right. And deposits right now in our market, and people are going to laugh depending on where they are. Deposit in our market, what are you telling people now? Like $5,000?
$5,000. I did one today for $20,000, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, totally. Whoa. That's a big deposit.
But it was $1 million plus home.
Yeah, so it's different in every market. There's no set rule, but the deposit is important to know is held in trust and it is refundable. So if you, during your due diligence, find something that you are not happy with, you can terminate the deal and that deposit gets returned to you, provided you've done that during your, agreed upon due diligence period.
Yep.
And again, that due diligence is inspections, financing, lawyer review, disclosure review, and all that. So I always tell people it's like you're agreeing to purchase a car, but you get a 10-day test drive first.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of that period, that's when you actually lock the deal in.
Yeah. And you don't spend any money. Like, there's no cost. Let's say you terminate the deal. There's no cost for your agent's time. There's no cost even for technically a lawyer at that point.
Nope.
The only person that you're going to be paying is any inspectors that you employ.
Yeah,
they
that's the only sunk
always
cost.
need to be paid. When they show up on site, home inspector, he's going to charge you. Sewer inspector, he's going to charge you. Radon inspection, they're going to charge you. All those things you have to pay for. Everything else, though, there's no cost in doing so. So it's not like you're about to be on the hook for a ton of things. The inspections can definitely add up, though, especially if the house is on septic and well.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily spend over $1,000 on inspections all in.
Sure. Yep.
So it's something to consider, and you don't want to be willy-nilly tossing in offers if you're not truly into the house. But on the flip side, like you said, it's a very nervous time, but you need to understand that it's not necessarily like the second, even it's accepted, you're not like super tied to it. I always tell my clients, like, if you go home and you're instantly like completely overwatched with anxiety and you're feeling like you made the worst mistake of your life, tell me ASAP. Don't wait till the last day.
Yeah.
Tell me the day we got it accepted. I'll call the agent back and try and get them to fix things up. That's not a legitimate necessarily reason to get out of a deal, but you're not going to force somebody to buy a home.
And
in
again,
that kind of situation.
I think this speaks to having the right people around you.
Yeah.
Because they need to feel comfortable going to Neal and saying, Neal, this is what's going on in my family's life. This is how this, offer has affected us. And we feel we can't proceed with this for these reasons. And if they don't feel comfortable having that conversation with you, if you guys don't understand what you're both sides are trying to accomplish here, they're not going to feel comfortable doing that. And then if things are going to get, either they're going to feel an obligation to execute the deal, which they don't have, or it's going to be some awkward relationship between you because you're like, well, I don't even know why they terminated. Are these people serious? Are they not serious? We love the home we offered. Now they can't. So again, you have to surround yourself with good people. And with respect to the inspection, have you ever been asked the question, well, what if it fails inspection?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. People think it's like a car inspection where it's like it failed and now you can't drive it. A home inspection is not that.
Every house technically fails.
Every house fails a little. It's just how many fail too much.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no home is perfect. So all the home inspector does, and realize that the home inspector works for you. And the home inspector should make that very clear when they show up, that their job is to be there as an advocate and an extra expertise opinion for your benefit and for no one else's benefit. They're just there to tell you the current shape of that home. Knowing and understanding that no home is perfect, they're going to summarize all of the deficiencies. And some of those are going to be based on code, which code is not applied retroactively unless it pertains to wood energy technology or knob and tube wiring. So these are going to be things that, hey, when your home was built, this was code. Now that wouldn't be okay. But it's still fine to be left as is. Mm-hmm. Then there's general home maintenance stuff. So if you've never owned a home before, an inspector is going to go around and tell you that, you need to scrape and paint your wood exterior. Mm-hmm. You need to keep some of these elements caulked to prevent water intrusion. General things that as a novice you may not know. And then there's going to be the items that immediately need attention. And these are what you're really going to want to take stock of and assess how they make you feel about the property. So even having an inspector with whom you can talk more candidly, and this is why I always tell buyers to try to be there for the inspection. When you get that report, it's pretty overwhelming.
So usually 30 plus pages.
Yeah, and if you weren't there firsthand or if you've never had an inspection as a buyer, it's natural to feel like, oh my gosh, I somehow seem to have purchased the one home on the world that it's completely falling apart. Yeah, and it's 9 times out of 10 not the case. So you want to be able to have an understanding with the inspector of, okay, what is really, going to affect the immediate enjoyment of my property? What's something I need to address short term? What's something that you're just telling me because you have a liability concern if you don't tell me? Yeah.
2 things with the inspection as well. Hire a professional inspector. Don't.
But my Uncle Carl built a deck last year by hand.
We built a deck by hand. None of it's to code. It's on deck blocks. He's coming to inspect the house because he knows what he's doing. Yeah. Or on the flip side, what was I going to say about that as well? Yeah, I think it's like you said, just understanding like that 30 pages. Oh, sorry. Even if you inspect a brand new home, there's going to be stuff on there as well.
100%.
Like it's really not indicative of the fact, like you said, there's 30 pages. Every house is going to have really well-maintained houses. Well, just the big thing is that first list, which almost every inspector does. Usually it's red or it's the first page, whatever it is. Those large items, those are the ones that you really got to focus on. The rest of things are going to be really small, kind of miscellaneous.
Yeah. Well, it's like anything else. We always say advice is free.
Yeah.
And it's often worth what you pay for it when it comes to like your Uncle Carl doing the home inspection for you. And, there could be if you have people in your life personally who, you really, they
Respect.
do have a high level of expertise and you do respect them and you think they are the sort of people you want to be surrounded with because they are inspiring to you and you are trying to get on their level or whatever it may be, absolutely bring them into the fold. But just, again, be wary of who that is. And then when you get that inspection, you hope that when you write an offer, just to backtrack just a little second, you hope when you write an offer, you have a good understanding of all these material issues with the home. And a good agent can take you there and say, this is what I can tell you about the roof shingles. This is what I can tell you about the window. This is what I can tell you about the electrical panel, the furnace, the heating, the plumbing, all of these things. And our offer should be reflective of this knowledge. Okay. The inspection then is only meant to address items that we were not already aware of and that materially affect how you feel about the home. Mm-hmm. Right? So this isn't a chance to be like, well, we knew the roof was old, but the inspector said the roof is old. So like, can we go and get money now? It's like, that's not really acting in good faith. That's not what the inspection is there for.
Yeah.
The hope is, again, that you would have had that information in advance.
Yeah.
But if you discover something new, then you have to decide, okay, does the mold remediation in the attic, right? Yep. This comes up all the time. Attics, if they aren't ventilated well. Yeah, you've got a humid climate here. They tend to get a little mold or mildew staining on the sheathing. Now, the attic is outside the living space of the home. You never go in your attic, but no one likes the M word. Mm-hmm. So then you have to decide as a buyer, how do I feel about this possible mold issue in the attic? Do I, 1, want the seller to address it? Do I, 2, want some sort of reduction in price? Or do I, 3, kind of not really care and am more focused on the fact that I got a good deal on this property that I just want to proceed with the sale as is? Yeah. And you as the buyer dictate that, right? The inspection is not pass or fail. It is just, here's some more information about the property that you maybe didn't have before, and you can make a better informed decision.
Number 4, you call Rainbow Halifax. We do attic mold sprays.
That's true. One of Neal's many companies. He'll mow your lawn, sell your used car, and then also
spray your attic.
Yeah.
I do them all myself too, so it'll be me. I'll come personally to your house and do it.
Yeah, that's full service.
Yeah.
So, provided you get through this due diligence, you've gotten the inspection, there's stuff in there because there's always stuff in there, but you feel like you can live with it, or you've gone back to the seller and renegotiated and come to terms. Hey, we couldn't tell the age of the hot water tank. It turns out it's 11. That presents some insurance issues for me. A new hot water tank is $1,200 right now installed for an electric unit. I want the seller to replace that hot water tank prior to closing. You do an amendment to the deal. Again, this all happens during your due diligence. The seller agrees to it, and now you have all your conditions met. You've got your financing locked in. You've submitted your deposit. You've talked to your lawyer. You've reviewed the disclosure. You've had your inspection. It is now up to you as the buyer whether or not you are satisfied enough to complete the due diligence phase. And once you have, that is when the property is sold. Once you've agreed, I'm fine with my due diligence, my date is here, I'm going to lock the deal in, and the property is sold.
Marked as sold at that point, yeah.
Yeah, it's marked as sold and put in the system. That's when there's no backsies, right? So this is when, anytime during the due diligence, if you just decide that, you don't like the color of the drapes, you can get your deposit back and walk away free and clear from the deal. If on the last day of due diligence, you've locked that deal in and the next morning you have a change of heart, your deposit is going to be forfeited unless you want to go to court and make things nasty. And getting out of that deal may be a bit cumbersome. Push comes to shove, you can probably get out of it, but a seller could then sue you for specific performance, which means they sue you and the lawyer and the judge gives you legal instructions to execute on the purchase. Or they sue you for damages, right? Wasting their time. If they can prove that you backing out of this deal after it was locked in has somehow caused them hardship, you could be liable for that. But I always tell people, trust me, by the end of this 10 days or 7 days, whatever our due diligence period that we've negotiated is, you will know everything you need to know to feel comfortable locking this in.
Yeah.
And that leads us to step 5, which is the preparation for closing. So sometimes, if you write an offer on day 1 and then you've got a 10-day due diligence condition period, you may not close for another 30 days after that or even 60 days after that. So you're kind of twiddling your thumbs. Drinking heavily, spending all that money that's supposed to be for your down payment.
Buying a new car.
Don't do any of these things. You effectively are preparing for that closing by way of, packing connecting utilities at the new location for effective on the closing date, scheduling any work repairs that you might want to do to the property. You've got to make good use of that 30 days when you're booking tradespeople, because if you've got it in the mind that you're going to have that house painted the first weekend you move in, you might have to book that painter a couple months out.
Yeah.
But from an actual practical standpoint, in the days leading up to the closing, you'll hear from your lawyer, and you really won't hear from them until a couple days before the closing, because they're waiting to get all the mortgage instructions from your bank. But you're going to meet with your lawyer, sign all the documents, re-sign the mortgage documents that you've already signed with your mortgage professional, and they're going to give you a total that says, all right, here's all the money you need to bring us. Your down payment, your property tax adjustment,
Closing costs,
all your closing fees, and they're going to give you one lump sum total that you're going to go and get in a bank draft, and you're going to bring that down to the lawyer. So it's the lawyers on closing that handle all the actual money. I've had situations where a buyer goes, and so when do I give you the money? I'm like, you never give me the money. It all goes through the lawyer.
I made the joke about buying a car. Do not take any credit products between the time that you go firm on that house to the time that you close. Yeah. Because by some chance, the bank could do a credit check again on you the day of closing or the day before, 2 days before. That happens quite a bit. And let's say you went out and bought yourself a new whip to go with your new house, and it's now changed your monthly payment status. They might say, we can't fund this anymore because he can't make these payments. Yeah,
don't want to take for granted. I'm like, don't do anything stupid. But human nature, like, okay, we got a new house, and now we're going to be commuting to work, and we can go and buy a new car.
Yeah.
You have to be mindful of that, because as Neal mentioned, if the bank, for whatever reason, repulls your credit, or if you finance the car through the same institution that's also financing the house purchase, they're going to see that. It may change your debt servicing ratio, and that financing that they locked in for you during due diligence, they may now take back. You were going to say, yeah?
I'll continue. I'll let you finish that first.
I was going to say, sometimes I see this with new construction, because sometimes it's like 6-8 months for new construction, 12 months right now. People are like, our car broke down. We had to get a new car.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful about that. But just to finish, the other thing that you do leading up to the closing is the final pre-close walkthrough.
Yes.
So what this is, if you offer on day one and you don't move in until 45, 60 days later, there could be a period there of well over a month that you haven't set foot in the home that you're about to buy. And in theory, anything could have happened then during that time. So what you do is you go back with your agent and you do one last visit, either the morning of the closing or the night before sometimes, just to make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be. They've tidied the home. They haven't damaged the home. Nothing of material nature has changed to the home, that they've left the appliances that they were supposed to leave, that they've topped up the oil tank, that they've made that little repair in that one room that they're supposed to do. All of these things, you do that one last visit. It's called the pre-close walkthrough. It's only supposed to be 15, 20 minutes. And then is when you tell the lawyer, okay, we've done our pre-close walkthrough, release the funds. And that way they will release the money over to the seller.
Release the hounds.
Release the hounds. And usually what happens is they'll send those funds over the morning of the closing. They'll get confirmed over on the other side. There's some back and forth just to make sure things have cleared, courier, et cetera, and you close the property. You're usually the official owner around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that what you find?
Yeah, I always tell everyone around 2, 3 o'clock, you own the house.
Yeah, and the reason that's important is don't book Bell or Eastlink or whoever it is for the same day you move in, because they're going to say, we'll be there sometime between 9 and 5. You'll think that's fine. That's the day I'm closing. I'm going to take the day off work. It's no big deal. If you don't own the home until 2 o'clock, you can't get them in there. So any of your cable connections, your moving vans, anything like that, book it for the day after closing.
Yes.
Right? Because also sometimes there's a delay in the closing, and then you've got a problem.
Yes. And one thing, actually 2 things I want to add. Prior to closing, one thing I'd say is the most common mistake that I see is people forget to have their insurance ready. Even if I send them an email or whatever asking to get their insurance ready, they almost always do. And your bank's not going to send mortgage funds until there's active insurance on the property. Mm-hmm. So you need to get that. Now, it's not the end of the world because you can call and get insurance pretty well immediately on the phone.
Yep.
It's getting a little bit, there's some hold and all that. But that would be, I'd say, the one item that most people forget. And then, like you're going to say, so on that pre-close walkthrough, in the event that you do find an issue, that becomes an issue for the seller that they have to fix that. Now, this market's gotten so crazy, some sellers will be like, go pound sand. I've even had builders say, go pound sand, where we get there and we're missing parts that were agreed upon in the contract. And they say, well, if you don't want to buy the house, we'll gladly take it back and sell it for more.
Yeah. you've got the rights to the property and the seller has the obligation to sell you. That said, they're still the owner, right? So this isn't just a slam dunk of the seller's supposed to do the right thing in this circumstance. There's a gray area of what the right thing is. More often you see things like, oh, they left a bunch of junk under the deck and behind the shed.
Very common.
I don't want to have to throw this junk out. What's it cost to do a couple loads of junk? So you get in the back of this whole thing on the day of closing, like, is it going to be $500 for the junk? Is it going to be $1,000? Is the seller going to come back the next day with their friend to get the junk? It can get really messy. But these are things that can come up on that pre-close walkthrough.
So this is where the agents come into play a lot, I find. Yeah,
totally. I mean, we're going to switch topics here shortly, and we're going to take a hiatus because I need to deal with a pre-close issue here. We're getting late into the day, but it's been back and forth since this morning at 10 o'clock where something really material has come up. And so I was like, yeah, we feel like we accounted for that in the sale. I'm like, yeah, not to this degree, and now we have to sort this out. But you go through this process. The day of closing is meant to be all roses and sunshine. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. But with a good team around you, you will get through it. This is when you can call the lawyer and be like, push these jerks, right?
Exactly.
I'm not standing for this.
Yeah.
And, you want your lawyer on your side. This is where they make their money.
Yeah.
And your agent's working behind the scene with the other agent negotiating.
Yeah.
If you don't have this rapport, you're going to be feeling like you're left on your own here in the final moment. And with that respect to the insurance, to be clear, that should be addressed during your due diligence period.
Yes.
One thing, though, is most insurance companies will not lock insurance in until it's
4 weeks.
60 or 90 days before the closing. So if you're closing in 3 months, you're going to be like, yeah, call us back later. And what you're going to do is you're going to forget to call them. Right?
Exactly.
So, but again, your agent will remind you of all these things leading up to close, and you'll get it all done. So that is the process. There you go. Boom. Now we're switching.
You own a house.
You own a house. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Now let's turn it into money, baby.
Now we're about to make you some money.
Yeah, so that's good for people who kind of want to know how to purchase the property. Now we're going to switch lanes to what you can do once you have the property. Yeah, so if we imagine a scenario whereby you've successfully purchased a home, but you've got big plans, you surround yourself with a team that invests in real estate and looks at real estate as a way to grow wealth. What are you going to do with it, Neal?
You're going to burr it, obviously.
Just burr it, bruh.
Everyone burrs it. That's what they do.
They need to add an O at the end, like optimize or option.
Bro.
Yeah, just call it bro. Might as well.
So this is, I think, more for the investor.
Yeah.
On average, I wouldn't say to someone that's just buying a normal home, especially because one of the R's is rent. So, but yeah, this is the BRRRR method, which has come up a lot. A lot of, I don't know what investor really first started using it, but one of the social media gurus kind of, I think, created this. I'm going to go over a quick thing for the buy. It's a little bit different than what kind of Chandler went over, because again, this is for an investor. So everything he said still applies. But if you're buying a rental property, there's going to be a few more due diligence items that you might want to go over. For example, if it's a house that's been converted into multiple units, you want to try and get a confirmation that it's a legal multi-unit house.
Yep.
Because a lot of people will convert homes without getting the permits and going through those steps, which could screw you down the road. Because if you go to do work to it and the city comes in and says, hey, look, this isn't actually a legal 3-unit, you could have to revert to a single family home. Yeah,
which obviously also affects the value. And with the BRRRR method, part of your due diligence early on and part of your data collection is about what is it going to be worth when I'm done.
Exactly.
Right? That's the whole process.
Exactly. And so that's why I said the most important part is this buy. And I say in that, you need to be able to identify if the next 3 R's are going to work.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing in this step. So typically in this, I mean, you get better as time goes on. It's a little bit difficult at first. And I find it's almost even more difficult on some of the smaller properties because it's based on comparables, which in a lot of markets, some people don't have. It's exciting now because it's very easy to get comparables because the amount of transactions that are taking place and the dollar values that they're happening at, you can almost always find a comparable that's worth more.
And to be clear to people, like a comparable is a sale nearby that validates or supports or determines in some cases the value of your subject property. So
exactly.
I think my home here can be worth this because the comparable home down the street sold for that. So that's what a comparable is.
Exactly. And so, yeah, so that's a big one. And in the buy, for me, most of the time I'm looking for, okay, so if this is what I'm buying this at, the rents are below market, it's this many units, you want to make sure that there's a comparable at that higher end value that you're looking for out of this. And you want to factor in your cost to get there. Right. So even though you might be buying a duplex for $300 and the neighbor sold for $400, like, I'm getting the best deal ever. It takes you $150,000 to make it look like your neighbors. You're not. You're actually paying 50 grand more than your neighbor did. So it's being able to kind of address those items. There's so much in the buy. The buy is such an important part.
The buy is everything.
The buy is absolutely everything. Like you can't win in this game if you're making bad buys or if you're overpaying.
If you talk to any flipper doing this, the way they make money is on the buy. The
100%.
work is going to be the work, and if anything, the work's going to go up. It's not going to go down.
Yeah.
Where you're going to make money on is the buy. And a lot of that research is that you're going to do yourself. But again, what I've said many times before, surround yourself with a good team that understands your goals and can walk you through these values. Because if you're doing this for the first time, you don't know how much it costs to renovate. Wouldn't it be nice to have an agent and an inspector that you trusted enough that you could have a good conversation with to say, how much is this going to actually cost? And they say, I don't know, I've never really done a project and I don't rent the properties and, it's not going to help you. So
yes. And I will say, even if an agent does give you numbers, I mean, you may want to validate them.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Sometimes I get frustrated when my clients don't believe me because I'm like, this is what I do all day. But I totally understand it because I've talked to some clients where they're like, oh yeah, we went to this place and he said it's only going to cost $70K to get it up. And then we go there and I'm like, $70K per unit? Or like, 'cause this place needs everything.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, the whole place. I'm like, this is why it's good to verify, but maybe bringing in a contractor. And a lot of them will be willing to come in and give you a rough idea. They might not give you a detailed quote, but they'll be like, look, it's going to cost you $100 grand a door to get this done. So yeah, that is major league important. The other item is for this, depending on how far you're going with a rehab, if it's more than just like, let's say, paint, coat, and some cupboards, if you're intending to add units, that's another thing that you really want to make sure you're confident on before you get into the property. Zoning, actually, I'm coming to find everywhere is quite intense. Like really, whether you're in the States, you're in Canada, zoning is very intense. So you want to make sure when you're buying the property that you have, you say you want to put in a basement apartment, you got to double check, triple check with the city, whoever is the governing body for that you actually can. Because I've seen people get them and we thought they could do 3 units and a backyard suite because their neighbor has one.
Yep.
That means nothing. He could have done it illegally. He could have done it 30 years ago and got grandfathered in. You got to make sure that today you can actually do what you want to do with that property before you buy. You do that during your due diligence. And this is often why rental properties have longer due diligence periods because they have to get confirmation that they have a certain amount of units. Totally. And that can take a few weeks. And then they want to get confirmation that they can do what they want to do. That can sometimes take months. Yeah,
which is challenging right now in this market where the seller's going to say, well, I could go with your offer that has a 3-week due diligence period, or I can go with this offer here that has a 1-week due diligence period. So in a competitive market, it can be riskier to try to shorten up your timelines while doing all this and covering yourself. So you need to build in some cushion to your exit strategy of, okay, if all things go poorly, am I still going to be able to come out the other side of this thing?
Exactly. And then I think, being realistic on your numbers, because I think a lot of times I go into these places with guys that are getting started out and like, oh, I can rent this for $4,000 a month. And I'm like, there is one unit in the neighborhood that is rented for $4,000 a month and it's over rented. And you don't want to bank on that. And if the market were to pull back at all, where are you going to be with this place?
Yeah.
Right? And to be honest with you, even if you get it there, sometimes the bank's not going to accept that. They're going to do a market rent themselves and say, we don't think that's actually the right rent. Unless you have a couple of years showing that you have that, they're not going to support that on their valuation on the back end.
I think maybe if we take just a tiny little step backwards for a second, the whole objective of this model when done successfully is that you put money into a property and when you're finished, by way of a refinance, which Neal is going to explain, you get all of your money back that you put in and then maybe a little bit extra.
And you get to keep the property.
And you get to keep the property. So this is why we're talking about what is the end goal and what is the exit strategy and why are these numbers so important. It's because you're taking a leap of faith that if you put in, say, $20,000 for the down payment and $60,000 for renovation, and you're tying up $80,000, that at the end of this, you're going to get every dollar of that back and hopefully then some, still own the property. And the reason you want that is because then you can take that same money and do it again. Right. Exactly. So that's why how this differs from just buying a home and taking pride in your home and sprucing it up and enjoying it and making it better. That's what people do over here. And they're investing in real estate, but in a very small scale. The Brrrr method is for people who the whole point is to do this once purely so then you can do it multiple times. And if you can't get the lift, which is a term you'll hear all the time, then you can't get your money back out, which means you cannot do it again.
Exactly. Yes, I kind of skipped over that because I always just, again, assume everyone's heard the Brrrr method and they understand the main concept. But again, I guess this is why we're explaining it. So 100% to what Chandler said. And when he says get your money back out, that is on a refinance. So when you get your final mortgage based on its end value, that money, subtract everything you spent, you should be able to pull your money out. So this is, again, with that, the basic math, it's basically very basic math that you're doing running into this. And you should be able, like you said, is have big buffers, right? So if you're buying for 300, you're expecting to spend 70, say you're going to spend 100, if not a little bit more, and your end value, you're hoping that end value comes out a bit higher than what you need it to be to get your money back. Now, when I started, I always wanted it to be that when I was buying it, it's 50% of my end value with even my renovation. And that was because the market wasn't that hot. You could pull that off. There were places that had the opportunity to do that. And what that meant is a lot of times I was pulling out 20% of the end game value on top of my down payment, which allows you to pull forward very fast. Realistically, that's not as much the case anymore. So it's more likely to come out around 70 to 75%.
So give us some hypothetical numbers.
So for example, if you bought a place for 100,000, you put in 100,000. So you're in the whole thing for 200 grand. I would want the end number to be 400,000. So the end value based on what you have all renovated and completed and rented is now 400,000. And for number's sake, we'll say you can borrow 75% of that loan to value. The bank would then give you 300,000. So you'd pay off the whole 100 of the original mortgage with the home and your down payment, which the down payment would come back to you. The renovation, we'll assume you did in cash. So you get that 100,000 back. Then the other 100,000 would also come back. So now you'd have all your money plus 100 grand, plus you'd own the property with $100,000 of equity.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really beautiful, extremely successful case.
Yes.
On something that might be a bit more conservative. If you perhaps purchased a property for $200,000, right? You put $60,000 into it, so you effectively owe $260,000. But at the end, it's worth $400,000, and you refinance at 75% loan to value. Even though you might get 80% loan to value, that's $300 to $320K, which means you're getting all your money back out that you put in, plus whatever the difference is. Yeah, $40K. So, and you own the property. So it's like, all right, I spent $60,000 out of my pocket plus my down payment, so call it 75 grand. I've got all of that back. Plus I've got this nice little $40,000 extra. Now I have $115,000 to do this again on the next property.
And a bit of rental income.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully it cash flows it. So that's again, going over the buy, that is the number. Like one thing is just making sure that your buy is very strong, running your numbers and not, I find some people are so keen to get in that they push the numbers to what they want them to be. It's like, well, my budget's coming at 150, but I'm not going to pull that all out. So I can just cut this out, and it'll be down to 120. And if I saw that they had these on sale, so I get them for this, and they'll squeeze their rental budget down, and they'll try and make all the numbers like really, really good. And then they're like, well, I can probably get the appraiser up to here and get the rents up to here. That if you got to do that, I always say if you got to like force it to make it work, and you really got to squeeze the numbers, not a great one, especially not to get started on. Right? If you already own a bunch and you're just kind of adding it to your inventory, not a big deal. But if you're trying to get rolling, like that's not a good way to get started.
Yeah, totally. And you have to be kind of say, all right, what is my goal? Do I need to hit a home run on this? Or am I happy just getting my money back? And then if you get your money back, then you've effectively purchased that property for zero money down, which is in itself a pretty good, investment. So you have to be realistic about what your goals are and temper your expectations and have someone that you're consulting with that can guide you. I mean, I always tell people I'm very, I'm happy to take risks with my own money. When it's someone else's money, I'm a bit more risk averse, right? So I tell them a bit more conservative numbers. And if the market goes your way, like you can imagine people who bought investment properties either in 2019 or even in parts of 2020, like how well they would have done with this model just based on what happened in the market. People did not see that coming. So plan for the worst, and maybe that's just getting your money back with a little kicker, and moving on to the next one. And if something better happens, that's great. It's a win.
Exactly. And now what I'm typically looking for in these, obviously on top of the actual numbers, the type of buildings, I like stuff, and I think most people in this market are ones that are mismanaged and ill-maintained, assuming the price matches so. Right? You don't want to go in and buy a building that someone's already gone in and cleaned up a bunch and get good solid tenants at market rents.
There's no lift there.
You're unable to make that lift because you can't necessarily increase the rents. You can't add value to the units. So you're kind of stuck at that value. You really want to find places where the rents are under market assuming again that you're paying the price based on those current rents.
Yep. You got to avoid what's called the romance of the wreck, right? Where you see a wreck property and you get all these grand ideas about how nice you're going to make it, and it becomes a passion project. People overpay for the romance of the wreck. You have to be very pragmatic with this, and you can't, you want to find these properties that you can clearly see the path towards the end. Like you can visualize the goal. It is worth this now. It is going to be lifted to this here.
Yeah.
And then what do I have to do to get it from there to there? Does that make sense? Will I get my money back and then some to move on to the next one?
Yeah. And then within, again, at the end, we're going to spend a lot of time on this buy because, again, the rest of the stuff is fairly straightforward. This is where the importance is. I'd say there's two categories within these mismanaged properties. We see some that actually aren't in bad shape. They're just under rented because the person's had them forever. Mm-hmm. And they just don't care. Like you could go in there and probably do nothing besides paint and increase all the rents by 10% or 15%.
Yeah.
And then there's the others where it's like, no, this place needs full guts. Like it needs everything new. And that's a whole different game. But they both offer the same opportunity. And I was actually in one yesterday, the 6 unit, where they're just all under rented. They're all very under rented. And I was telling my clients, said, look, you guys come in here, you put down laminate, you paint the place, you can get all these rents up by $300-$400 a month.
You manage it.
You literally just manage the building. And by adding $400 a month in rent, that's like adding almost $75,000 a unit in value. So right off the hop, they're going to be able to pull forward. Now, they're not necessarily going to pull out a big lift out of it, but in about 18 months, they'll probably be able to pull out their original investment, maybe a little bit less, but they'll own the property and they'll have the equity within it. It'll cash flow, and it's a good step forward.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of using this interchangeably to speak about small single-family homes and larger multi-unit properties because, as I mentioned before, this is the same thing people have been doing for years at every level of the market.
Yeah.
So, if it's a multi-unit or be it a small scale or a large multi-unit, a lot of the lift can be had by management and rent income stream. If it's a single family home, you're limited essentially to what you can do to that property, in which case the buy is also heavily reliant on, like you said, the comparable sales.
Yeah.
Right? Like what's going on in the area. And it's old cliche of, pay for location and buy the worst home on the nice street and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. These two are very, so 4 less units on average, they're looking on a comparable basis. Like your neighbor sold for this, yours is kind of worth this. After that, that's when rents and cap rates and things like that become very important.
Yeah.
It's almost easier in some ways though, because it's really math oriented and it's not complicated math. Once you build your spreadsheet, you can almost reapply it to everything.
Yeah, we're going to do the ultimate guide to cap rates here soon on the podcast.
We'll get deeper into that. But again, on broad scale, basically you want to get places that you can increase those rents, but you're not paying a big dollar value for something that doesn't have the rents yet. And a lot of times, honestly, you can't because the appraisal just won't come in to justify paying for it, right? If it's only getting $500 a month, they're not going to give an appraisal that's so high. So you wouldn't be able to close that deal anyways. Another thing you always want to make sure you do when you're buying something bigger is get environmental on the purchase.
Also a future episode. We've had some interesting ones on that. Anyways, so that's the buy. There's still some more other stuff that we can get into, but again, we'll get into it here in the different next steps. So once you've completed the buy, now the next step is rehab or renovate. And this is where you're adding value. You're spending money, you're adding value, you're making them better. And this is, again, it's best that you have a good team around you. So not like your agent, your broker, but also contractors. Very important. Because if you just go out and hire the fanciest GC that you can find, they might have a great Instagram, but they're going to charge you $200K to renovate a unit, and then you're going to have no ability to make money on it. Yes, it might be beautiful, but there's going to be no lift left because they took the lift. Yeah.
So you need to be conscientious, and you need to find out, you need to GC. Especially getting started, you have to GC everything. You have to pick out each of your independent sub-trades. You got to price check, and you got to verify they're doing it.
It also might help if you know how to swing a hammer. I mean, my first couple properties, I was in there because my hourly rate was low enough that it made sense for me to be in there putting down laminate, doing trim, doing tile. I also, because I was, a bit skeptical, I wanted to know what was involved in all of the labor so that one day when I was paying for it, I understood what I was paying for. Yep. And I knew the trade-off. So, early on, I did a lot of that work myself, and it's where some people find their competitive advantage. If you are handy and you can do some of these things, that can help with those numbers. Because, when I give my clients these numbers, I would say, this is the Yellow Pages number, which some people are like, what are the Yellow Pages? But like, this is the retail price for these things. Yep. So if you can go out there and do some of this work yourself, you're going to better the retail price. So I'm going to give you the high-end number. You do it for less than that, that's more money in your pocket.
Exactly. I 100% agree with that because it's hard if you're not from that industry to understand what things cost, and people can easily pull the wool over your eyes, and you're like, wait a second, I've done that. It only takes 40 minutes. And why am I getting charged $1,800?
Yeah.
So learning cost is extremely important. I think the other thing to consider is when you're doing the renos, what actually impacts your ability to rent the unit and to get good rent dollars.
Yep.
Because some people are like, oh, I'm going to put gold plating on the outside of the building. And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I was like, as cool as that is, I was like, I want to see the gold building. I want to be a part of the gold building.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay any extra rent to live in my unit because the outside's gold.
I have a couple like that where like sometimes, oh gosh, I wish I could do something else to the exterior, but it's not going to raise the rent, right? No. Like you have to be careful, like what you do for passion projects, you know, and what you're actually doing running this as a business. Yeah,
you got to consider what's going to get the big ones. Like right off the hop, the thing that I always push everyone onto is bathrooms. If there's a female renter coming in there, they want to see a clean bathroom. Not to stereotype anything like that. Guys on average are kind of like, nah. There's a hole in the ground, and then there's a spot for me to rinse off. Okay, sweet. I might only use one of those. So, but like a female renter is going to be very serious with it, and some males are too. But it's a really important item. People want to feel comfortable in their bathroom, and so if the second they're in there doing a showing and they're just like, "This is a disgusting bathroom," the huge turn off right off the hop. Obviously, hard surface floors. I think that's old news now. Like almost everything is hard surface floor. Kitchens, I find, make a huge difference as well.
Of course. You can also do kitchens really economically. And this is where the experience starts to matter.
Yes.
Because maybe you don't need all new cabinets and boxes. Maybe you can get away with painting a new countertop and a backsplash. Like you have to know your demographic for that particular area. If you do quartz countertop in an area where people don't know what quartz is, like it's not going to affect the rent. Right? Like, so you have to be mindful.
Is that a dig?
No, that's not a dig. But I love that is kind of, that was not intended to be a dig. Neal just has got a great deal on quartz.
Yeah.
But you need to kind of know who your target demographic is. You need to know what is a smart spend and what isn't. And you need to be mindful of what the pricing is for the stuff. It's also why, and again, coming back to the buy, what can you salvage from the existing property? That's always key. The last thing you want when you're doing this method is to get into things like windows and roofs and heating systems.
Siding.
Because not only are they expensive, but just like the gold plating on the outside will not get you more rent. The brand new roof shingles are not going to get you any return. Windows, tenants like them, but let's be honest, like they're not going to pay you more money because the windows are better. So if you can find a place where some of these big ticket items that aren't fancy but are really expensive are already done, that's a place where you can get good lift because then you're going in minimal investment, cosmetic stuff, and just elevating the property that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, you don't need to go to an extreme. I actually went to the extreme. I took this exact thing to the extreme. I just never did any of the exteriors of my buildings. Like I just kind of kept them basic and they look kind of shitty. And I look back and I'm like, you know what? Like I could probably squeeze a bit more rent out of these and get better tenants if they looked a little cleaner. And now I'm going back and fixing a lot of my exteriors. But paint's your friend. Paint is your friend. Also,
exteriors I find don't matter a whole lot with rent, but they can matter with appraisal and quality. Because, you know, again, this gets back to cap rates a little bit, but your rents are going to be what the rents are. But when you're talking to your appraiser about pushing the value, it helps if your home looks nice from the outside, right? You can say, well, listen, this is a nicer building. It deserves a lower cap rate.
That front picture on the appraisal report.
Totally, right? Like it does help, but that's not going to change your cash flow month to month.
No.
But it could impact your refinance down the road.
Exactly. That's why I say be economic with the outside. I'm doing a lot of siding painting.
Yeah,
I find that's a great way to do it. It's like, siding $40,000. I'm going to paint it for $7,000. Like, you know what I mean? $5,000. But yeah, so it's just being smart about what you spend the money on, and you can reuse a lot of things. I'm going to say it again. Paint is your friend. Like there is a lot of stuff you can paint to make look really good.
Highest and best return.
Yeah, easily, all day.
And if you're doing stuff yourself, everyone can paint a little bit, right?
Yeah. So you get the rehab done. You're all finished up your renovation. You're super happy with it. Now you got to get it rented out. Look around your neighborhood. See what things are renting for. I always say go after top rents.
Yeah.
Right off the hop. My big reason is once you're done the reno, that's the nicest that unit's going to be until you reno it again. So get somebody, like get the top rent in there, because once you get someone in there and you're like, I'll raise it next year, I'll get the next person I'll raise it on. you're going to go do that, and this person's going to move out, and there's going to be all sorts of nicks and dings, and some cabinets are going to be off, and things are going to look a little bit mucky, and you're like, crap, I can't get a top rent anymore.
Also, like, know what's going on in the rental market at the time. Like right now, there is a shortage of housing. The vacancy rate is super, super low. So you might be able to start marketing the property before you're even done.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's that shortage of inventory here right now. And that also means you can put a test price out there.
Yes.
Right? Like say you know that you're 60 days out, but maybe 70. So realistically, you're 3 rental months away from occupancy.
Yes.
Right? Why not put your rent out there at $1,800?
Yeah.
Right? You run that for 30 days. If no one snatches it up, which they probably will because of the market, then you could still lower it to $1,600 and have 60 days just to rent it.
Yeah.
But to Neal's point, like that unit is as nice as it's ever going to look.
Yeah.
So why not capture that with typically a better tenant who's going to care for it.
Go for gusto at that time.
Yeah.
And at the same note, get the appraiser in around that same time, usually before someone moves in, assuming it actually looks pretty nice.
Yeah.
Because there's a good chance it could get worse as time goes on. So you'll want to get the appraiser in early. Also, it's good to get the appraiser in a bit early because you'll come to find out that those steps take time. So you don't want to wait until, okay, I've gotten everything done. It's fully rented. It's sitting there. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to start the process of refinancing and getting the appraisal and all those other items. Mm-hmm. So in this step here, even though refinance is technically the next step, you actually want to be starting it like near end rehab.
Because you also want your money back ASAP.
Exactly.
Right? Like you're at this point, you're hemorrhaging money paying for all these things. And whether you've got that on a line of credit, whether you've got that on a purchase plus improvements mortgage, which is maybe something that we can talk about here just really quick. When you buy a property for $200,000, you can get $40,000 worth of quotes, for example, and take that to your bank and say, I'm buying it for $200,000, but I also want $40,000 to renovate it. Because you need to finance these repairs some way, be it purchase plus improvements, or you can go and take a separate line of credit, or you have to cash flow it. So either way, you're going to want that money back as soon as possible. So the earlier you can get it turned over,
the better.
And this is also one of the things I learned when I was trying all these things myself and getting myself familiar with, what is involved in laying flooring and all this stuff is my time is also worth a lot. Like if it takes me 3 months to complete the project, whereas I could have outsourced it and it been done in 1 month, that's 2 extra months of rent, right? Like, so you learn these things through doing, but you need to be mindful of your time because you want to get it refinanced quickly so you can capture that equity, pay yourself back, get some extra lift, and then hopefully buy another one.
Exactly. Regarding the renting, we'll go more into, we'll probably end up doing a thing on just like getting good tenants, the process. I think we kind of talked about it before a little bit as well.
It's everything we touch on, really.
Yeah.
Like it's about renting.
Yeah. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think the biggest one for me is, like I said, is go after top rents. Also, if you have a fairly big multi-unit, even not necessarily fairly big, but it goes a long way. It's like $50 a month. If you do it on 5 or 6 units, you might be surprised how much it bumps your end value.
Cap rate episode coming up soon.
Exactly.
It's going to be
cap rate episode will be good. So anyways, you get it rented out, and then we kind of already transitioned, but refinancing, again, that's something you want to start, I'd say, earlier than actually having the property rented. A lot of times, a bank will give you an LOI, a letter of interest, saying that a letter of intent that they'll fund you at a certain percentage, assuming your appraisal comes back good and you meet those rents, right? So like you can already kind of know your numbers before you're even done. You can know your numbers on the buy. Actually, you can get, when you purchase, you can get an as complete appraisal done at the same time. I frequently do this, and that allows me to finance my construction money. So I'm buying, saying I'm buying at $200,000. I already have an appraisal telling me that if I do what I said I'm going to do and rent it for what I said I'm going to rent it, it's worth $400,000. The bank will be like, okay, we will finance your purchase, plus we'll finance your renovation.
Yeah, and that's essentially how that purchase plus improvements method works. Like the appraiser goes there and says, okay, show me what you're spending this $40,000 on.
Yeah.
Right. And then they assess, okay, well, when you do that, the home's going to be worth this, and they feel good about it. It gets more important when you're doing larger scale projects because it's big time money and you kind of want it up front so you can finance these things.
Yeah.
So you can pay for these things. Sorry.
Exactly. Purchase plus is kind of your basic getting started one. And then as you get more into the bigger ones and more cost based, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bigger project though. They will do smaller projects. They can do a lot of financing on your renovation, and they can do it in draws. So they can give you sections as you go along. So you're not having to hurt. If it's going to take you more than 4 or 5 months to get it done, you don't have to wait until you've done everything to get the money. They will give you your sections along the way.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that is huge. And that was major for me. That was like an enormous thing. And most people ask me, like, how are you buying these buildings and doing all the renovations? And I'm like, look, I'm buying it knowing the end value, and the bank's giving me the money to do the renovation. So I'm not really feeling too much out of pocket. They might want to see 20% of renovation done by me.
Mhm.
So every draw, they might give me 20,000. I got to spend 5,000.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not so bad, and it allows me to keep going, and it makes it a lot more feasible for you, because a lot of people see, okay, crap, I got to put down 25 or 20% on this house, which is 80 grand. Then I got to spend another 80 grand. I don't have 160. I have 100.
Yeah.
Right?
Or even if they're starting off with 5% down, they're like, I got to put 15 down, 7 grand close. That's 22. And you're telling me it needs 40 grand worth. I don't have 60.
Yeah.
Right. So these programs, again, talk to a good mortgage professional, understand your options from your realtor, your whole team. People have done this before. You can do it too, but you need the right advice. So you've bought the home, you've rehabbed it, you've got it rented, and you've refinanced it because you had the appraiser come in and say, this is what it's worth now, or this is what we knew it was going to be worth when you completed it.
Yep.
What happens now?
So now you get your cash. That's a fun time.
It's a good day.
You can either you go to your lawyer's office and you pick up a refinance and you see your down payment, potentially renovation money, and potentially even more sitting there. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, it's also like it's relief as much as it is excitement. It's relief that you got through it. You got your money back. So, if you scrimped and saved every dollar you had and it was 80,000 or 120,000, or maybe it was only 22,000 of your money and then 40,000 of someone else's or the bank's, to see this line item that says, hey, just so you know, that renovation thing is paid off.
Yeah.
The existing mortgage is paying off. We're putting this new one on there. And here's the simple net out of this check that we're going to cut to you right now.
It represents so much too. It's like, look, I'm proud that I went through the whole process. I'm rented. The project's done. Like it represents that the accumulation of this entire process, which a lot of times will take at least 6 months, if not a year, a ton of hard work, sweat, tears, stress. It's completed. So it's an exciting time. On top of the money, you're just like this huge satisfaction of like, I got this done. Well,
as you and I talked about in an early episode, like we like the creative aspect of this. Yeah. And this is like when you finish a puzzle and you put that last piece in, it's like, it's done. Yeah. It's working the way it should work. Yeah. Right? Because you've bought something that's underperforming in one way or the other. And now you brought it back to life.
Exactly.
Right. And, and you've housed people there. And yes, there's always this thing about, well, you've unhouse some people to serve a different market.
Yeah.
But it's nice when you are able to give people keys to their new place and they're pumped to be there.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lovely thing.
Exactly.
And it's tax-free. Yeah.
So now you have your refinance check. You book a one-way ticket to Vegas.
Yeah.
You go to the first roulette table and you slap the whole thing on black.
Yeah.
Once you've doubled that up, you book another one-way ticket back to your hometown.
And you buy two.
And you buy two. No. But in all seriousness, repeat. That's the last star. It's repeat. That's why the whole process is trying to be expedited, fast, smart about it. And you're likely doing this because you want more. But on that same note, I see this as a mistake that a lot of people make. The second they get that check, they're just all over me. Like there's 3 duplexes left on market. And like, we got to see all 3 of them. And I'm like, the reason they've all been on there for 180 days is because they're absolute hot garbage. Mm-hmm. And like, no. Like I gotta get, like, and they're just so.
Well, what is the repeat? The repeat is to start back at the buy, and we talked about how important that is. None of this works if you did not get a good deal to begin with.
Yes.
In fact, the opposite problem happens. All your money is stuck in the property that you can't get back out. So this is why I tell people all the time, exit strategy, exit strategy.
Yes.
Tell me, like, if you're going to bring a property to me, because people bring properties to us, what do you think of this? I say, just tell me the numbers of how you're going to get all of your money back so that you can do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, when you go to the repeat, just think about everything we talked about in the buy. Take your time, go through all your numbers, work with your team. Don't rush into something just because you have a bunch of cash burning a hole in your pocket. But you know what? I also say do celebrate. Like whatever your little thing is, get yourself a little something, right? Like if you want to get yourself something that was whatever, it depends how big it is. But if you want to go for a big fancy meal,
celebrate the wins, man. You got to celebrate
go for a trip.
Wins.
I was bad for doing that. I never celebrate the wins, and you start to lose the excitement and flavor. It just becomes part of the process. But take a little bit off and be like, this is a reward for my hard work, and get yourself something.
Yeah. Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. So,
all right. And then you repeat.
Yeah.
So rewind this back, start it again, do it again.
Yeah. So put our podcast on repeat constantly.
Get fired up. Watch it, looking in the mirror, pumping yourself up.
Exactly. Thanks for listening. Check out our other stuff. Please let us know if you have any questions or things you'd like us to cover.
Yeah. Get engaged.
Yeah.
It's good. Let us know.
Yell at us on TikTok.
I love that. All right. I got to roll. I got to sort out this issue that happened at a pre-close. So applause me out of here, Tanner.